Welcome back, gentlemen and ladies, to your favorite part of the HIAC Talk Radio podcast, the one we try to do every week, but we've been off for a while. But we're back with more historical goodness. My name is Craig Lagans, of course, joined by my cohorts, Dan Rebecca Calachico and Mark Go Thompson. I'm sorry, Dan Becky Calachico. Rebecca was way too formal. We'll be going back to a time when there was wrestling in all 50 states, packed with people not observing social distance laws and mask-free, yelling at the top of their lungs, throwing babies in the air, and cheering for their favorites and booing their non-favorites. We're going to go back to a time where titles were called belts, where medical facilities were called hospitals, and back when sports entertainment was professional wrestling. This is a very historic week that we're going to look at in professional wrestling history, complete with lots of firsts, lots of lasts, and lots of genuinely iconic moments. We're going to start at November 6th, 1994. Hard to believe it was 26 years ago. But this was the date of the first American pay-per-view that was not WWE or WCW. I'm talking about the iconic pay-per-view When Worlds Collide, the AAA pay-per-view. Coming to us live from the LA Sports Arena. The AAA wrestling organization outside of ECW was the most profitable and had the most fervent, passionate fan base there was. Wrestling in Los Angeles hadn't seen this type of boon since the late 60s, early 70s at the Olympic Auditorium, with such stars as Freddie Blassie, John Tolis, Victor Rivera, and later on Roddy Piper and Chavo Guerrero. But the AAA organization in Los Angeles was doing record crowds in LA, and so much so that they were able to have their first pay-per-view. And this was the first pay-per-view that wasn't WWE or WCW. And it was the first time American audiences got to see for the first time such notable legends as Psychosis, Louis Spicolli, the Pegasus Kid, who we now know under a mask was Chris Benoit, and the great Rey Mysterio. This was their American debut. The main event was for the Tag Team Championship. Octagon and El Hijo de Santo, the son of the saint, were going up against the most over, the most hated, and the most controversial tag team in North America, Los Gringos Loco, Eddie Guerrero and Art Barr. The crazy Americans who would cause riots in Los Angeles at some of their house shows were the most over tag team in all of North America at this time, and they had a hair versus mask match. And it was a 3 falls. Each fall was an elimination bout. So in order to win the bout, both members of your team had to be pinned in order to win.
Sorry, I broke the rule. I already broke the rule.
But that's what made AAA such a phenomenal organization back then. And because of that pay-per-view that had all those great stars that I mentioned earlier, they all got snapped up within months from ECW. And in Louis Spicolli's cases, ECW, then to WWE. But that was what the culmination of what was then the biggest non-WCW, WWE organization in professional wrestling. AAA, I would dare say, was bigger than ECW, just for the amount of fans that they had and the amount of revenue they were joining, and they had the hottest tag team. But it's all, the whole card is available on YouTube, and I probably say this every year on this time, but please, if you're a fan of any of the people I just mentioned, or even just true luchador wrestling, granted this was 26 years ago, please give When Worlds Collide a shot. It was also called by Chris Cruz, a longtime WCW announcer, who called the match, and he called it perfectly. The matches were great. The action was great. The crowd was absolutely unbelievable. Do either of you guys remember that pay-per-view?
No.
No. Okay.
Wait, no.
Yeah.
The only reason I remember it is because me and my brother were obsessed with wrestling at the time.
Mhm.
And you had remember when pay-per-view would put, like, they knew you loved wrestling, so they would give you the pay-per-view commercials about wrestling.
Mhm.
And I remember watching that one. I was like, I don't know what AAA is, but I want to watch it. Because I remember I accidentally tripped my parents into buying a New Japan Pro Wrestling one time,
Mhm.
pay-per-view, because I was obsessed with Ultimo Dragon. Remember when he had all, like, 27 belts?
Yeah.
He was
And he's
like,
part of the
he had so many belts, they were like his whole uniform was belts.
part of the J Crown. Yeah. He had
Yeah,
10
it was
belts at the same
amazing.
time. Yeah.
So, like, I saw that, I was like, oh man, maybe we want that. And they're like, man, like, we just bought you that New Japan one. Like, let's pump the brakes. But apparently, this is the one I should have dumped the money into. But the reason I bought that New Japan one, I think Great Muta was fighting Sting in Japan. But
Mhm.
are you, like, just you saying that stipulation, like, makes me so happy. Because I love triple threat matches where you have to beat both people.
Yeah.
2 out of 3 falls where you have to beat both members of the tag team each time.
Yeah.
That's the baddest thing I've ever heard in my life. That's like the best tag team match you've ever watched.
And it was the best tag team match of the year, in many people's opinions, in 1994. Like I said, it put all these guys on the map. Rey Mysterio, Psychosis, Chris Benoit, Louis Piccoli, all signed with ECW within months of that. Unfortunately, and I said Los Gringos Locos, Eddie Guerrero and Art Barr were the most over tag team in all of North America. After that match, which was a highlight, which was a match of the year, and what a match to go out on. We didn't know it at the time, but that would be Art Barr's last match. He died a month and a half later at the age of 27.
Wow.
He and Eddie were supposed to come in as a team. That same team, Los Gringos Locos, were supposed to debut in ECW. That didn't happen, but it did pave the way for Eddie Guerrero's solo career, which when he got to ECW, his matches with Dean Malenko were on the same. I put them on the same level as Flair and Steamboat or Rock and Roll Express versus the Midnight Express. But had he and Art Barr come as a tag team, we may never have seen those matches with Dean Malenko, and Eddie probably would have never had the singles push that he had in ECW, then going to WCW, and of course going to the WWE. But yes, November 6th, 1994, When Worlds Collide, landmark pay-per-view.
Just one last thing, if I can. Louis Piccoli, I think, is, once again, I'm going to put in that list of vastly underrated wrestlers of the history of the wrestling universe. There was just something about him. He kind of breathed that wrestling energy to me. And every time I watched him, I just loved him. And I also loved the Spicoli driver. So anyway, sorry.
I was about to say, Louis Piccoli was so beloved and so respected in the business, they renamed it the Spicoli driver for a little while.
I know. Like when John Cena does it, I still just say, that's just a bad Spicoli driver.
I remember Louis Piccoli because I don't remember knowing about him until he was in early 98, he was going to WCW.
Yeah.
And he was just the little bit, and it was a little bit because they're terrible. The little bit they were using Louis, I was like, I like this guy a lot. And just like that, he was gone.
Yeah, and when he got called up to the WWE as the grunge rocker Rad Radford. But before that, though, he was a jobber in the WWF. He goes to Mexico and LA and reinvents himself and has this great heel run as a heel. And that's what got him on the pay-per-view, and that's what got him back to ECW, where he had that great run in ECW, and then got called back to the WWE. But his gimmick in AAA and in Mexico and in Los Angeles that got him so much heat because he didn't go by his name, Louis Spicolli. His ring name was Madonna's Boyfriend.
Yes.
So that's what got him over. That's what got him heat, is being Madonna's boyfriend, telling everyone that he was Madonna's boyfriend is what got him to be one of the biggest heels in all of AAA. But but When Worlds Collide, November 6th, 1994, 26 years ago. Give that a look. We're going to go November 8th, 1975, a landmark date, because when this happened, it kind of took a whole organization in a different direction. You know, we talk about in the 70s, there was the big three, the WWF, the NWA, and the AWA, and the champions were always the same. Bruno, either Jack Briscoe, and in the AWA, it was Verne Gagne, and that's how it stood for 3 years straight. And for years and years, it was just one of those guys. But November 8th, 1975, Nick Bockwinkel defeated Verne Gagne for the AWA title, and he would hold that belt for another 4 years, longer than any man did. And Nick Bockwinkel, as AWA champion, took that company in a completely different direction. Because here was Verne Gagne, you know, old school Verne Gagne, bald, had been on the golden age of TV, had been on the Milton Berle show, and it was all American, clean. And here was Nick Bockwinkel, who'd always been part of the greatest, maybe the greatest tag team of all time in AWA history, at least. Nick Bockwinkel and Ray Stevens, he was always a tag team guy. No one took him, seriously as a singles man. He had been Georgia heavyweight champion in '72, but he'd always been an AWA tag team guy that Verne had beaten on multiple occasions, and he was even seen as not even as good as his partner Ray Stevens. But he defeats Verne Gagne for the AWA belt and would hold that belt for 4 straight years. And in that time, he made the AWA championship on par with the NWA and the WWF championship. Because when the NWA titles would change hands from Briscoe to Funk to Harley Race to Giant Baba back to Race, and when the WWF title would go from Bruno to Billy Graham to Bob Backlund, it was Nick Bockwinkel that whole time holding that AWA title, coming out on interviews in a suit with sunglasses on, with the greatest manager of all time by his side, Bobby Heenan. Anytime you see a world champion with a suit, people think it was Ric Flair. It was Nick Bockwinkel who did it first. People, a world champion coming out talking about how much he hates coming to this certain town because they're not in his class. Nick Bockwinkel did it first. Considering the fans humanoids, Nick Bockwinkel did that first. Nick Bockwinkel and Bobby Heenan cut a path not only through the AWA, but through professional wrestling in that 4-year straight reign that no other wrestler-manager combination has ever touched. Everything you see Ric Flair do with that world championship belt with a suit on, Nick Bockwinkel did it first, and some purists would say Nick Bockwinkel did it better, because if he hadn't set the bar that high, there would not have been a Ric Flair to copy it. But it all started November 8th, 1975, and Nick Bockwinkel, not Verne Gagne, who had held the title 10 times and who was one of the first AWA champions, but it was Nick Bockwinkel that turned that belt into something. So when a young Hulk Hogan came around to challenge for it, it became a big deal. But Nick Bockwinkel's first AWA title reign that lasted 4 straight years started November 8th, 1975. Go.
Funny you should mention Nick Bockwinkel, because, you know, the guy I think maybe is the greatest wrestler of all time cites him as the inspiration to a lot of his work, Chris Jericho.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, especially when he did that comeback when he was wearing the suit and tie. Yeah. That was a big thing that Jericho was on. It was the Nick Bockwinkel thing. Also, any time that you put anything with Bobby the Brain Heenan, anytime, you could have like put For example, you put the Brooklyn Brawler with Bobby the Brain Heenan, who was the Brooklyn Brawler, and you were still like, no, I'm in. I know this guy's a loser. I'm in. This is the greatest wrestling of all time.
Yeah, and that was
because Bobby the Brain Heenan is the greatest manager ever. Boom, said it, done.
Mm-hmm. And he didn't need to legitimize Nick Bockwinkel because, again, you have a great talking champion, but you pair him with a great talking manager, and you've got a license. You got a license to print money.
Yeah, you put gold with gold. It was double gold.
Yeah, and that's why I put them as the best manager wrestler combination of all time. But the 4 years that they were in AWA, they were unmatched. Go ahead, Dan.
I just wanted to say about Nick Bockwinkel, and I will never not say it when we're talking about Nick Bockwinkel, is that is one of the wrestlers that I plead and beg people, if they've not seen, to go back and watch.
Yeah.
On the mic, in the ring, my God, was Nick Bockwinkel
Just
groundbreaking. You get past his name, and yes, over.
Isn't part of the fun of it though?
What?
Isn't Nick Bockwinkel all part of the fun of who Nick Bockwinkel is?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, but people don't know that.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I'm like, ignore the name, and when you come back to it, you let me know. Because
I will say you go to Nick Bockwinkel, you go to YouTube from Nick Bockwinkel promos, perfect. You need matches, Nick Bockwinkel versus Jerry Lawler in Memphis, Nick Bockwinkel versus Hulk Hogan in St. Paul, Minnesota. And you can look at the match, but look at the crowd. When Nick is over Jerry Lawler, look at the crowd that wants to kill him. When Nick has got Hulk Hogan on his back, or when they think Hulk Hogan is beating Nick Bockwinkel, look at the crowd. Because it's not the person now, not taking away from the fans of Jerry Lawler or Hulk Hogan, which were legion, but because they were going crazy, is because they thought they had beaten their favorite guy had beaten Nick Bockwinkel. Okay, only a heel can do that. It's the guy who's wrestling, not just the face. Staying on that date, November 8th, 2005. I even got a message on this on social media. November 8th, 2005, at a SmackDown taping in Indianapolis. We already mentioned the man, his big league debut, as it were, was November 6th, 1994. But we got 11 years of greatness out of him. But November 7th, 2005, at a SmackDown taping in Indianapolis, Eddie Guerrero defeated Mr. Kennedy by disqualification, and that would be Eddie Guerrero's last match. The disqualification, the referee had been knocked down. Eddie went out, got a chair, whacked it against the canvas, and threw the chair to Kennedy. Eddie plays dead. Referee gets up, sees Kennedy with the chair, calls for the bell. Kennedy is disqualified. Eddie wins. That at the very same spot was replayed 3 weeks ago on Raw with Ricochet and Cedric Alexander in honor of Eddie's birthday. A touching tribute to him, but we would lose Eddie Guerrero 2 days later. But that would be his last match, his last televised match, November 8th, 2005.
I'll go real quick if you don't mind. I missed a lot of the Eddie Guerrero highlights, the WWE Heavyweight Championship stuff. I fell out of love with wrestling then, and I feel like I do like a disrespect to wrestling by not knowing that stuff. Same with Chris Benoit winning the world title. I always feel like I missed like a bunch of that, but I also feel like there's like a lot of great matches that I watched that people didn't see. There's this amazing match, and I forget where it was, but it's Eddie Guerrero versus Ric Flair. It might be for the US title. I don't know. Something silly like that. but it's on like Nitro. It is just like Eddie Guerrero is just such a like above and beyond performer that like could wrestle any style. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like he really had a lot to add to any match, not just personality wise, which I think flourished in the WWE, but just in ring style, just changed the way wrestling worked. So there you go. I'm sorry, Craig. Go ahead.
No, apologize. And I will co-sign on that only because, we in our previous episode we talked about Randy Orton. There's something about third generation superstars, guys that know what they're doing in the ring, and guys that you can just tell they just have an otherworldly feel for it. Eddie came from a wrestling family, wrestling loyalty. I talked about the wrestling in Los Angeles. Well, the Guerreros in Los Angeles were like the Von Erichs in Texas.
Oh, wow.
They were that's where they all got their start. That's where they all got their first belts. That's where they were all introduced to professional wrestling. Was in the Los Angeles area. Chavo was the big, the main box office attraction in Los Angeles in the early 70s, in the mid 70s. And who would know that Eddie, the last one, the youngest of the Guerreros, who would know that he would be the most famous and the most accomplished out of all of them, because you put them together, Chavo, Mondo, Hector, all look like superstars because they're all born and bred in this business. Eddie was a guy that just took it and ran with it. We've talked about wrestling families on this podcast before, about the Armstrongs, about each one of them had something different, how the Von Erichs, each one of them had something different to contribute to wrestling. The Guerreros were no exception. Chavo was the first superstar. Mondo had the head for the business. Hector was the best worker. Eddie just had the charisma and the mic skills and that personality that made him an A+ heel and an A+ face. And like Orton, like the third generation superstars, like Rock, they could do it all. There wasn't anything that they couldn't do in the ring. They'll take a crowd and they'll take you anywhere you want to go. Eddie's supposed to be a heel. He lies, he cheats, he steals. And he's still the most over guy in the company. That's my credo. I lie, I cheat, and I steal. And he's a huge babyface. And we sadly had to say goodbye to him 15 years ago this week. But his last televised match was November 8th, 2005, against Mr. Kennedy. Again, watch it again, just for the or even just watch Eddie's funniest moments. It's still one of my favorites to watch over and over again. And you are correct. You did miss a lot. I'm not even going to try to make you not feel bad for missing Eddie.
I want to go back and watch a lot of it.
And like, Chris Benoit.
I watched it's a Mania, right? That they both win the belts in the same.
Yeah,
I watched that one. You know what? That hug that they share, and once again, you being a WCW guy that watched them grow up there.
Mm-hmm.
You like really appreciate the fact that they got the belts.
Yeah,
they got the world championships in the other company. That finally, two guys from outside of whatever Vince built were respected enough to get to the top of the pedestal. But man, the things that could still. I hate to be like this, but Eddie and Chris could still just. I know you probably hate that Eddie and Chris were still going, but they could still be going in some backhanded, fun kind of way.
No, yeah, and Eddie and Chris, I think would still be part of the WW in some way, shape, or form, in some capacity. Either backstage guys or the guys that comes out to break up the fight, or both. Eddie would be. I wouldn't say Chris would, but I say Eddie would be a great manager to anyone trying to get someone over. He would be.
If you put Eddie with Almas and Garza,
yeah,
like you're just writing gold, aren't you?
Yeah. Or even if you put him in AEW with the Lucha Brothers,
Oh my God, just perfect. Just
Yeah. So yeah, I think they would still be part of wrestling business because they grew up in it and they really don't have anything else. Would have anything else to fall back on. Go ahead, Dan. I'm sorry.
Not related. I was watching AEW, listening to you guys talk about it.
Okay.
Here, this is what I'll add. Put Eddie Guerrero right next to Nick Bockwinkel.
Oh yes.
I say that with zero reservation and zero timidness. Eddie Guerrero could out wrestle anybody on most cards,
Mm-hmm.
and could probably, if he was alive today, still out wrestle most people on most cards. That's just the way Eddie Guerrero was that good. I take pride, personally, blow smoke up my own ass, that I was able to watch him from ECW, watch him on WCW, right on through to the end. And a lot of us can take that claim of pride to be able to watch this man's career. Not pride that we saw the end of it, the way it ended, but I am so happy that I got to grow up with that dude. And I just astounding is not the word for that man.
No, and Dan, I'm lucky enough to see Eddie on both trajectories. I got to see him wrestling ECW. We're on his way to WCW and the WWE, and then I got to see him after he was fired from WWE and went through rehab and come back to the ECW arena when he was the Intercontinental Champion. This is his comeback and coming back to say goodbye and having him team up with the Maximos, the SAT, for a one match only runoff back when you can wrestle for the WWF and WCW and still go to indie shows. And so I got to see Eddie and also watch him at the National Guard Armory against CM Punk, who I didn't know who he was, and an unmasked Rey Mysterio have a triple threat match that go an hour. So I got to see Eddie on both of his on his way to the WWF after he got fired, and then going back to the WWF after he was rehired after the rehab. So he never failed to disappoint. And he got it. He wasn't humbled. Even going from, he's going from main eventing stadiums and to now changing in an ECW bathroom at Swanson and Rittner. But he knew that that's the only way he's going to come back to where he was, to get his family back, to get his livelihood back, to get his job back. So yeah, I'm very lucky to have seen Eddie in both of those incarnations.
Do not read the HIAC account before you watch AW, sir.
Well, it's not that he's never changed in that bathroom before.
No.
Well, that's true. Yeah.
Go ahead.
You're good, bro.
November 9th. Very important date in professional wrestling. I'm going to go back to 1956 to show you how far we've come. November 9th, 1956, Lou Thesz would defeat Whipper Billy Watson in Toronto, Canada, to win his second NWA Heavyweight Championship, the second of 6 for Lou Thesz. But I point this out because from November 9th, 1956, till for the next 4 years, and for the next 7 years, Lou Thesz would be the undisputed professional wrestling heavyweight champion. He would be the last one. The AWA wouldn't be founded until 1960. The WWF wouldn't be founded until 1963. So from this date, November 9th, 1956, till both of those dates, there was only one professional wrestling world champion. That was the NWA heavyweight champion, Lou Thesz. And that would be the last time there would only be one, like as in Highlander, there can be only one. And that last undisputed, no doubt about it, no other man but him was champion, was Lou Thesz. And that would occur November 9th, 1956. And until the AWA was founded in 1960, and until the WWF was founded in 1963, the man, and to be the man, you had to beat the man, and that man was Lou Thesz.
I always appreciated that Stone Cold Steve Austin would whip out the Thesz. Wow, that's hard to say now. Thesz press.
Yeah.
As regularly as he would drink a beer.
Yes.
I love that.
Typical old school move, the one that Tommy Rich used to win the NWA heavyweight title that he held for 5 days. He won it with the Thesz press.
Nice.
April 9th, 1981. And finally, November 9th, Dan Gogo, November 9th, 1997. It may not be the most talked about match in professional wrestling history, but it is still the most talked about ending in professional wrestling
Oh,
history.
okay. That's why I know the date.
Is this the date that changed professional wrestling history forever? November 9th, 1997, Survivor Series, Montreal, Canada. The Worldwide Wrestling Federation heavyweight champion Bret the Hitman Hart in the main event against the Heartbreak Kid Shawn Michaels. It's been called the night that changed wrestling, the birth of Mr. McMahon, the beginning of the exposure of how horrifyingly bad WCW booking is, or as it's commonly affectionately known as the Montreal Screwjob. November 9th, 1997 is a date that will always live in infamy. Thanks to the great documentary Dark Side of the Ring, we have more insight as to actually what happened leading up to that. We've covered this on this podcast.
Thanks, Jim.
Many times, but the person who came up with the finish, we now know, was the Louisville Lip, James E. Jim Cornette, only because, like myself, he is a student of wrestling history. He and his mortal enemy Vince Russo were at Vince McMahon's house trying to come up with a scenario because they had gone to Bret Hart about getting the belt off him. Bret had already signed with WCW, and in the contract, the 10-year contract that Bret Hart signed that I pointed out on this very podcast, that Vince McMahon couldn't honor exactly 1 year later. But in that contract that Bret signed, that gave him creative control, which meant that he could decide who or how his bouts would go and who he could drop the belt to. He didn't want to drop it to Shawn. He would have dropped it to The Undertaker. He had no problem dropping it to Stone Cold Steve Austin. And his way, he wanted to voluntarily turn it over that Monday night on Raw and say goodbye to the fans. Of course, Vince wasn't going to go to that. And fearing another Medusa scenario with the WWF champion showing up on WCW Monday Night Jericho with the WWE belt, wanted a way to get the belt off of Bret Hart. Now, and every scenario that Jim Cornette and Vince, Russo, and McMahon gave to Bret said no to. Bret didn't like any of them. And so they're wringing out their hair, and Jim Cornette's already pissed off because he's living in
Jim Cornette.
He's Jim Cornette, and he's living in Connecticut. He's gained 50 pounds, and he's across the table from the person he hates most in the world, who doesn't know anything about wrestling.
Right.
And Vince McMahon goes, well, fine, how would you do it? How would you get him off? And Jim Cornette relays a story about Strangler Lewis, who was the World Heavyweight Champion in 1931. And no one could get the belt off him. But Strangler Lewis wasn't good for business, and so they wanted a way to get off him. So in the in Montreal, of all places, ironically enough, against Henry Lalonde, they were wrestling in a match, and Henri got Ed Strangler Lewis in a headlock, and he threw him over. And Ed Strangler Lewis went with it because he probably I'm going to go with it because he's going to set me up for another hold. Just then, Henri started clutching at his chest, yelling at the referee, he bit me. And the referee sees this huge bite mark on Henri's chest, calls the match, disqualifies Ed Strangler Lewis, and gives the belt to Henri. That was the first Montreal Screwjob.
Magical.
When in reality, in the dressing room before the match, Henri's manager, Dan Koloff, no relation, had bit the chest intentionally of Henri, bit it hard enough to break the skin, draw blood, so Henri kept his arm over his chest, put on his ring jacket, and kept his arm close. So when the match started, he just grabbed Strangler Lewis in a headlock, threw him over, claimed that Strangler bit him. Referee disqualifies Strangler, puts the belt on Henri. That was the first Montreal Screwjob. Jim Cornette gets the idea. Well, the sharpshooter. It's if Sean puts a sharpshooter on Bret, and the referee calls for the bell, then we'll say he can't say that he can say he didn't submit, but it's a submission hold. And if he says he didn't submit, then he'll know it's a work. And Bret Hart, of all people, wrestling purists, another second-generation superstar, would never expose the business. So that's how you get the belt off him. So Jim Cornette was much in fear of his life as Earl Hebner was, even though Earl Hebner swore up and down that he was not going to screw Bret, and they even rode on the same flight. I don't know if you know this, Go. When they were flying to Montreal, Earl Hebner was on a flight, and he gets bumped up to first class. The stewardess comes over and said, you've been bumped up to first class. Bret Hart bumped up Earl Hebner to first class on their way to Montreal. And he said, Earl, I don't have a good feeling about this, but I know I've known you my whole life. You've known my family.
No.
So I know I can count on you. And Earl said, I'm not going to count you out. Right before the match, before they go out to the ring.
Well, technically.
Jerry.
No. Technically, he did.
Yeah, Jerry
He didn't
Briscoe.
count him out.
He didn't. Jerry Briscoe grabs Earl before they run out and said, when he puts his sharpshooter on, you call for the bell. And Earl said, I can't do that. And Jerry, grabbing harder, because Jerry Briscoe, true shooter, even at that age, could still hurt you, separating Earl's tendon from his bicep from his bone, said, you want a job? Is Bret Hart going to pay you? Is Shawn Michaels going to pay you? No. We're going to pay you. So if you don't like your job, you ring that effing bell. So Earl still calls it the longest walk of his life.
Do you, okay. I'm so sorry. You know there's people that believe this is totally the other way, right?
Yes, and those people are wrong.
Yes, those people are completely incorrect.
I just wanted to hear you say that.
No, they're wrong.
Yeah, they're wrong.
No, that's stupid.
So when
Go ahead, finish, Craig. Finish. No, hold on. Let Craig finish. Hold on. We'll talk about it.
So the match goes on, and what's lost in all this, gentlemen, is the match between Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels is damn good.
Oh, it's great. Yeah.
These guys can't put on a bad match. Like Flair and Steamboat and like Eddie and Dean, they know how to go. Even though they can't stand each other, they know how to put on a damn good match. And everything they were doing was exactly what they had gone over before. Now, because the other people knew that there's something that could go wrong, you'll notice if you see the replay over Sergeant Slaughter, Jerry Briscoe, Rene Goulet, all these former wrestlers are surrounding them in case something does go wrong. And when they go out in the crowd before the bell even rings and they bring them back in, everything was fine. But that was for their protection, more so for Shawn Michaels' protection, because if anything really did go down, you fear for Shawn Michaels' safety way before you fear for Bret Hart. Bret could hurt Shawn. Shawn couldn't hurt Bret. That's why Bret was prepared for a shoot, because he knows that Shawn couldn't pin his shoulders in a shoot, and definitely couldn't make him tap out. So as long as Shawn was cooperating, he didn't think there was any problem, and he knew he had Earl Hebner to count his word that he can count on. So they went through the match. What was supposed to happen, Shawn was going to get Bret in the sharpshooter. Bret was going to reverse it. Davey Boy and Jim Neidhart would storm the ring, followed by Triple H and Chyna. They'd have a big schmoz, double disqualification. They go on tomorrow night on Raw, title change, one or the other. Of course, that didn't happen, because as soon as Shawn put the sharpshooter on Bret, and Shawn did it wrong, Bret had to reposition his own legs to have Shawn put the sharpshooter on him.
You see him look up and go, wrong way.
Wrong way. And so Bret was helping him out, because this is how the match was supposed to go. So and Earl didn't call for the bell, and Vince McMahon was screaming at Earl, ring the bell, ring the effing bell. And then when Earl finally did do it, because if Earl didn't do it, Vince was going to do it himself. And Earl feared for his job. He called for the bell, ran out of the ring, out of the arena to a waiting car, and took off. The only person that was ahead of him when he saw this finish was Jim Cornette, because Jim Cornette just realized that they used his idea to screw Bret. So when Jim got in his car, and he was convinced that he was going to get his ass beat, when he got in his car, and he thought he was being followed, he saw the headlights behind him, and he thought, oh my God, the jig is up. It was Earl Hebner's car.
Speeding past him. I'm out. I just like that Jim was like, he's sitting there watching the video, he goes, all right. And he gets up and leaves. He's like, we're done.
Well,
Go ahead, go.
Just real quick. Like, you're a person I would love to hear both of you, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine a universe.
Thanks.
No, shut up, Dan. I'm asking both of you.
Mm-hmm.
The universe where it doesn't go down.
Yeah.
What happens?
What happens?
Brett leaves. Like, does WCW never dissolve? Like, I mean,
wait. Hold on. Explain if it doesn't go down. You mean if Vince can pay Bret, he doesn't have to leave, or the screw job doesn't happen?
No. The story he just told me, where the brouhaha happens,
right?
And the next night we just lose the belt.
Okay.
And it feels like Bret was on board with that, doesn't it? Am I insane in thinking that Bret seemed pretty on board with that?
Yes.
Yeah.
For all intents and purposes, Bret Hart doesn't seem like a dick.
What? Hold on. I've read his book. Bret Hart's kind of a dick. Bret Hart to me is the other Sting. I love Bret as much as I love Sting. You know how much of a Sting mark I was. He was my favorite. But I read his book, kind of a dick.
Right. You start me out. Got it.
Yeah, and with Bret and Jim Cornette and even the other wrestlers will say this. Michaels was a prick. Everyone was on Bret's side.
Yeah.
But with Bret not wanting to lose the belt in all the different scenarios they gave him, he kept shooting him down. No. It just got harder and harder to work with him.
Let's backtrack real quick, go. The reason why this started was because there was an incident, was it about a year prior, where Bret went to Michaels after all the BS, put his hand out and said, listen, whatever the differences between us, I'm paraphrasing, whatever the differences are between us, I'll never screw you in the ring. I'll always do business. And as he shook his hand or didn't shake his hand, I can't remember that part, Shawn says, that's a pity. I'd never do the same for you. Yeah. So you already got That's in the documentary, and it's been people found out later when for some reason I've gone back to watch the Wrestling with Shadows and the subsequent stuff in the WWF. Nobody mentions that, and then all of a sudden around mid 2000, Bret mentions that story, which has been corroborated. So it happened.
Yes.
So you've planted this this seed of doubt already in Bret Hart's mind, who's back there going, no, fuck this guy. I'm not giving him the belt on my way out. What?
Why be
because Shawn Michaels was a pill-popping jerk-off. That's why.
He was a prick. Yeah.
Listen, go ahead, Craig, go ahead.
And everyone to a man will say that. Even Shawn Michaels will tell you what a huge prick he was. And Bret even corroborated that story on Dark Side of the Ring. He said, I put my hand out and I said exactly what you said, Dan. And Shawn said, oh, I appreciate that, Bret, but I would not do the same for you. And that's where it was.
So here's the thing about Shawn. At that point, Shawn Michaels has this constant dick measuring contest in the company because he's the other guy. It's Bret and it's Shawn. That's it. Even with Taker there, it's Bret and Shawn, right? Yeah. So you have this ego on top of the Clique being together before they obviously went to WCW. You have this powder keg that's just waiting to go off. And this was it. This was the culmination of all that inflated ego, all of the back and forth, all of Vince not being a good boss and being, hey, assholes, knock it off. To go back to your question, Mark, you said what happens if the screw job never happens? He goes on Raw, he drops the belt, and they move on. All the momentum's lost. WCW still dies.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
Vince McMahon's not a thing, right?
No, not at all.
No, and the Mr. McMahon thing does not happen. That's why I preface
Like,
this
do
by
you think
saying,
Stone Cold Steve Austin never effing happens?
oh
Not
yeah,
like
Stone
that.
Cold Steve Austin. Yeah, it's Stone Cold still happens, but not like that.
No.
Because there would be no Mr. McMahon to rebel event. Why I call this is this the most important date in professional wrestling history because so many things happened after that. Vince McMahon is revealed as not just the announcer but the owner of the company, and now that was the first time we got to see him as the head, and that gave and he talked about Bret the next day on Raw with the black eye that Bret Hart gave him in the locker room after the match. He said, Vince, if I'm going to take a shower, if you're still here when I come out, I'm going to knock you out, and that's exactly what he did do. And in the Smaz, Shane stepped with whose ankle got sprained or broken with it. Shane's.
Vince, as he fell.
Yeah.
Vince's foot broke as he fell, taking the shot from
Yeah,
Bret.
and they stepped on Sergeant Slaughter's head on his foot.
You see the shot of him limping down the hallway and wrestling with shadows. The camera's kind of hidden, and all you see is you hear Vince like, "Don't let the camera see me," and you just see him hobbling after they got his almost dead ass up off the ground.
And the next day on Raw, in his interview with Jim Ross, he was very cold, very calculated, and the immortal words, "I didn't screw Bret. Bret screwed Bret."
Yeah, it's all there, man.
And it gave the rise to the Mr. McMahon character.
Little more perspective for Go Thompson, and then back on track to what Craig said. And then I will let Mark answer after that because I want to hear what Mark says. Has to say, not said, has to say. Present tense, not past. You have to remember, and I learned more about this through Kelly's timeline of watching this when she used to watch wrestling a little more often than she does, which is zero now. Nobody knew Vince was the guy. The Smarks knew Vince was the guy.
In my brain, I knew. Okay.
Right. I don't remember not knowing either. But what I remember not knowing, but for all intents and purposes, a lot of people didn't know. And this was the moment people found out, oh, got it.
Yeah.
There's one counterpoint. I wanted to bring up the counterpoint, because you're right, Craig, about the reason he didn't want the repeat of the Medusa and the women's title on the trash bin. Yeah. But I always bring up, well, that's a response to years earlier when Vince had Ric Flair march out on, was it Superstars?
Yeah, with the
big old belt, man.
With the WCW belt.
Everybody doesn't bring that up. I'm like, fuck you. Vince did it first with the belt.
Well, the asterisk being Rick owned the belt.
Oh, no, I know that. I know that. But what I'm saying is Vince absolutely took advantage of that. It was like, put that on TV, Pally.
Yeah.
Mark.
Okay, so all that being said, does this in theory make Vince is Vince like the greatest heel of all time?
He's up there. And as far as a non-wrestler goes, yes.
He doesn't even have really any face face persona. Like every once in a while there's face pops for him.
Yeah.
But isn't he the only heel that you can really name that's always a heel?
No, he was face a couple times after that.
I know, but cheap face. It's face pop. And then he immediately goes if you had if you look at someone's career, they were 90% heel. Because it's impossible to name anyone that was just heel their whole career.
The Sheik was
the Iron Sheik.
No, the original.
No, original Sheik.
The original.
The original. Well,
nothing but heel.
Okay. Well, when was that?
That was from the 60s all the way up until 1984. 94 with ECW. But no, the Sheik was, and in my opinion, only because the amount of gates that he drew and the amount of heat that he got for an extended period of his career from Detroit to Toronto to Michigan to Indiana to Texas. The Sheik was, and for a 10-year period in Toronto, he was undefeated. And fans came out just to see him lose, to see him get beat, to see anyone do anything to the Sheik. He's the greatest heel of all time. I would put Piper over him only because, but Piper was faced quite a bit. McMahon, obviously, Mr. McMahon is one of the greatest heels of all time, one of the greatest heel characters of all time. Top 10, yes. Specifically because this was not the intent. This was not the intent. Mr. McMahon was never supposed to be a central character in any way, shape, or form in WWE. He was
he want to be
the lead announcer. No, he already is $1 million man.
He didn't want to be $1 million man.
Okay. He is $1 million man. But Vince McMahon, if everything was going to plan, he was going to be the announcer and then slowly transition himself to behind the scenes because he had enough announcers. And at this point, Shane was already a referee, so he was going to make his way toward the same way that Vince did, from referee to being behind the mic to. But Shane, just like his dad, always wanted to be one of the boys, wanted to get in the ring. So when Vince became the Mr. McMahon character following the Bret Hart Montreal Screwjob, he also got to live out his fantasy of being in the ring because that's what Vince always wanted to do. Because if you saw Vince throughout his commentary career, any chance he got to take a bump like one of the boys, he was ecstatic. The very first Manager of the Year contest in 1977, when Arnold Skolin won over Lou Albano, and they had a big giant trophy in the middle of the ring, and Lou Albano took it and hit Arnold Skolin and Vince McMahon with the trophy, and they both took a flip over the top rope. That was Vince's first bump. When Ric Flair came to the WWE in his feud with Roddy Piper, and he knocked Piper out and Vince on the color commentary, Piper got up, went to swing a chair at Ric Flair and missed and hit Vince square in the back. Vince goes down. That's his second bump. So all this is stuff that Vince has wanted to do. Wow. He never would have gotten that chance had Bret Hart and the Montreal Screwjob not happened. What still would have happened, though, Bret Hart had been a peaceful transition of power. Where have you heard that before? Yeah. And Bret Hart left the WWE without the belt and gone to WCW. WCW still would have messed it up because of who was in charge there. Because rather than have Bret Hart come into the Sting versus Hulk Hogan match as a referee, why not Bret Hart come in and said, hey, I'm still world champion. I was never beaten. Let's make this a triple threat. And there you have your license to print money. Sting, who had been a year without speaking, finally gets his hand on Hollywood Hulk Hogan. And here's Bret Hart debuting for the first time, fresh off. He's the most popular wrestler on earth, fresh off the Montreal Screwjob, never beaten for the championship.
Yep.
And he served WCW on a silver platter. But of course, they bring him in as a referee. So many things could have gone, but all the ripple effects all happened November 9th, 1997.
I want to say, Mark, before you go on.
Please.
Yes, that is the most important day in wrestling history. Yes, I will say it's the most important day in wrestling because it totally sets off the WCW thing that doesn't work out, and that eventually is the beginning of the end for them with the Bret Hart thing. The start of Mr. McMahon Stone Cold feud that then elevates WWF absolutely is in every way possible. And also, I just want to reiterate, if you think it's work, shut up.
Yeah.
Stop talking.
I would, this November 9th, 1997, I put alongside January 23rd, 1984, Hulk Hogan's win against Iron Sheik for the WWF Championship as the two most important dates in professional wrestling history. In that it
which
not
was
only
also a work, right?
Yes, that was a work. When Hulk Hogan beat the Iron Sheik. But in both instances, they both not only changed the company, the WWF, but changed every company around them because just like with the Montreal Screwjob, not only changed the WWF, it changed WCW and the way business was dealt. But January 23rd, 1984, not only changed the WWF, but changed professional wrestling because not only did that mean that WWF was on top, but professional wrestling. Everyone, the NWA, the AWA, world class, Georgia Championship Wrestling, Florida. I mean, when Hogan was champion the same year that the Road Warriors debuted. So professional wrestling and cable TV just it was a perfect storm. So I put those two dates, November 9th, 1997 and January 23rd, 1984, as the two biggest dates in professional wrestling history. Go.
Oh, I thought he had more to add. Yeah, no, go ahead, close out the wrestling historian, sir.
I can't think of a better way to close it out. I intentionally had November 9th as the last date on this edition of Wrestling Historian because, like you just said, Dan, it's the most important date in professional wrestling history. Shockwave still being felt 23 years later, 23 years this week in Montreal. Those of you who were fortunate enough to see it live when it happened, I have friends who were like, "What did we just see? Was that supposed to happen?" I said, "No." Brett spitting on Vince right there on camera. No, that's not supposed to happen. It live and not having the internet that we have now, and having to find out in some ways, like days later, what actually happened after the camera stopped rolling, and Brett spelling WCW in the air. I didn't find that out till like a week later. Or if you got to email other people on fan sites that were actually in Montreal, because pre-internet 1997 kids, news traveled slow. You didn't hear it right away. You had to wait a couple days.
Yeah, and who knew Canada had email then?
Yes. I still don't know that. I think they just got it.
They might not. I mean, they still love hockey.
Yeah. But November 9th, 1997, the most important day in professional wrestling history. WWE Survivor Series, Montreal, Quebec, Canada, a date which will live in infamy. And that is the wrestling historian.
And with that being said, go Thompson.
That was awesome.
Yeah, it was awesome. Go Thompson.
I interrupted the host. I'm sorry.
Nobody listens to me or him. Nobody listens to me.
You pointed at me.
I did. Oh, I'm pointing at you now. Where the fuck do people follow you on social media?
Go Thompson at Arm Drag PC. Both of them. That was so much fun.
Yeah. Well, guess what?
No,
just
shut
wait.
up. Listen.
Oh, okay.
That was amazing. This guy's a fountain of unicornic knowledge.
Unicornic knowledge. I'm stealing.
I wish we could bottle him and sell him at liquor stores.
You can't. No.
Because his
as soon as he says
so high, his potency would be so high. We can just put him in a supermarket. That kind of wrestling knowledge, you can't just release that to the general public. You have to be 21 or older to have that shit.
Well, I would like for people to start paying me for this. Yes.
Well, if you want to be 15 and learn it, you just tune in.
That is the end game.
Okay, well, Craig, where can the people follow your wrestling knowledge and unicornic knowledge?
Well, in most fine liquor stores, you can follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and on Twitter. You find me on the shelves there under the name Craig Ligon, CraigLiGgeons. Do not exceed over 2 tablespoons or consult a doctor first.
I've been told by many. I was told by a good friend once, who I no longer talk to because he refers to Craig's race as the blacks.
Oh no! Okay, well that wasn't that quick.
We don't talk anymore, but years ago he did tell me that I was like a Jägermeister, only good in small doses. So if we were on a liquor store, people would buy Craig more than they bought me. So follow me.
That means that I drank a gallon of you at a bar one time.
No, well,
One
I
time.
hope I tasted good. Nobody's ever complained before. Follow me on Twitter at DanLoy83. Hey, HIAC Talk Radio is at, you guessed, Facebook and Twitter at HIAC Talk Radio. Go to VOCNation.com for all the podcasts in the VOC Nation Radio Network. If you're on your smartphone and you want to listen to us, go to your podcast app and type in VOC Nation Radio Network, or watch the shows live on twitch.tv/DanLaw83 or on YouTube.com/DanLaw83 the next day. For Craig Lagans and for Mark Go Thompson, I'm the above average comedian Dan Calcico. We'll see you next week. Goodbye.